The Constitution is presumed that state attachments, state prejudices, state biases, and state jealousies might sometimes obstruct the administration of justice by state judges. Therefore, it is the case and not the court that grants original jurisdiction to the Supreme Court. So it's the case. If the state is named as a party in the case, state of Washington versus Tom, that state cannot be the judge in the cause. And as a result, the United States Supreme Court has original jurisdiction. No other court in the country has jurisdiction to be able to oversee the disposition of that dispute. Original jurisdiction, personal jurisdiction is assigned, constitutionally codified to the Supreme Court of the United States. So what I have is that why for 243-year-old to fulfill the obligation that they have, because all of these cases are void. That's why we see the bias within this system. That's why the probate courts, that's why the guardianship courts, that's why the CPS courts, that's why they all work together to advance the interest of their master's estate. It doesn't matter who that agent is. If the agent is bringing together an accusation, an enforcement element, a CPS saying, these parents are bad parents, we're going to take that child, their objective is to take that child and to reap the benefits financially of removal of that child. And so they're all going to work together, including the judge, to advance the interests of their master. And that's why we had to have a separation of powers, right? Because we have limiting powers where if the accusation is brought by the state can't be the judge. Federal court must be the judge. But that's not the way that our system is designed to be. And I'm going to tell you guys, and this is a little bit different than what most people are aware of. Yeah. It's not what we see. But all laws were meant to be made by the central government. That's why the Constitution says all legislative power is vested in the Congress of the United States, consisting of Senate and House of Representatives, because the states were not meant to have laws that affect people. Central government, we have a representative government that would come together, and all those representative government, they would determine what the laws are. And then through a federation, because we have a federal, they would federate those laws out to regional governments for application administration. That way, if you break the law, you're breaking the laws of the United States of America. The United States brings the accusation, and then the judge could be a neutral, unbiased decision maker because he's not attached to the government that's seeking the enslavement of the individual. We had a separation of powers that was meant to exist, and it was designed within our system. But then we ended up with a bunch of governments, a bunch of states that decided that they could create the laws in what we would call a confederacy and not a union, because a union is not a sovereign. The sovereign states, it's actually non-sovereign states that are all subject to a higher government's laws. So the states were not meant to have their own laws that would apply to the people, because if they did, state couldn't be the judge. We have
so state courts basically have become fiefdoms. That is, there's someone in a place of authority that has the authority to rule in people's lives, that also has an interest in how that ruling plays out, because the court is a profit center for the state,
right?
And the judge is working under state authority and therefore for the state ultimately,
yeah.
And so that judge has a vested interest in a predetermined outcome, where if a child can be monetized, if an adult, a family can be monetized, if anyone can be monetized through the courts, that the judge and all the players share a vested interest in the outcome of that case. And therefore, there's a built-in bias, the way the legal system is working, that can only be overcome if we have a system whereby the laws are not the state laws, but are federal laws, which is the way it was designed originally and is meant to be. And then the state is applying those laws according to the federal laws. That would create an unbiased system of law whereby we would have equal justice for all, an equal, where we would have the rule of law, instead of this system of little fiefdoms, little kingdoms, where you've got these imperialist judges basically running their little kingdoms. Am I describing this fairly accurately?
Absolutely, yeah. Our Constitution, what it does, once again, is it establishes rights and limits powers. And it limits powers by limiting the power of government. Because once again, government has powers, they don't have rights. When we talk about states' rights, that people need to understand, states don't have rights. That's code word for discrimination. That's permitting a state to treat people differently. That's causing conflict. And so states don't have rights. People have rights. States have powers. But those powers are specifically limited because we don't want an unlimited government. And so in some cases, the state's rights or state's powers are limited. In other cases, the federal government's powers are limited. And in more cases, both powers are limited, but they're all limited in order to preserve the individual liberties of the people, right? Because the preservation of the people's liberties and rights, that's what we wanted to put emphasis on, not in the state's ability to be able to oppress or advance the state's interests. But we had these concepts that, once again, were brought in by that Supreme Court. You have to understand, the Supreme Court is not pro-Constitution, because if the Constitution got its way, they would all be out of a job, because the Constitution has declared that all men are to be free, and yet they are in the business of enslaving people, you know? And I try to make sure that everybody understands this, because we can look at this from a historical perspective, that when our country started a system that where our founders and forefathers, they were creating a system where all men were going to be equal, but then they refused to give up what they called their property. And they didn't start a just system because it's not built upon the equal justice of all men, because it's not built upon the equal application of all laws, but instead upon the slavery institution. We built into this system not a just system, but an enslavement system. And as a result, you know, we can see a number of terms like the Fugitive Slave Act. The fugitive is a slave, slave is a fugitive. Those two terms are synonymous with one another. But we can also go to the 13th Amendment, the very amendment that was adopted and ratified to abolish slavery. And what it says is neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist except as punishment for crime. So now what that amendment did was it made synonymous the term criminal and slave. They mean the same thing. If you are a criminal, you are a slave, under the exception clause of the very amendment that was supposed to abolish slavery. So now we know what they're talking about. They told us the truth. A criminal is a slave, and a slave is, and now we can see why mass incarceration exists. But if that's true, then if you have a degree that makes a person into a criminal, you literally have a degree in slavery. You have a degree that removes the freedom of the people, and then you wonder why they follow judge-made rulings. You wonder why they are anti-Constitution, because they're trained to enslave the people of the United States. They're trained to go against the Constitution, because if the Constitution got its way, we would have peace and harmony. We would have not the breakdown and fracturing of our nation like we see today in the dissolution of these states, because they're no longer participating in the central government. We wouldn't see these things happening because we would have peace. The Constitution is designed to do that. Instead, we have conflict and crime, because conflict and crime creates a whole lot of money for their institution. And so you're absolutely right. They're in the business of creating conflict. That Supreme Court has been undermining the laws of the United States since its inception, right? It's been undermining the Constitution. It's been undermining the Union through a number of judicial rulings that have intentionally been put into place to advance their interests. And I can point out a number of them. And a lot of people they're not aware of this, but, you know, we look at that Supreme Court and we say, oh, that's the honorable court. But that's not an honorable court, because, you know, an honorable decision, let me just give an example here. So, you know, mass incarceration started from the drug issue, right? Our own government, CIA, is well known. They were going and dumping crack cocaine here on the streets, and that's well known, right? And so as a result, that was starting to enslave the people, right? And so then we saw mass incarceration begin. We started to see the ramp up, and they started criminalizing this drug use to a massive scale, because the judges were saying, well, who's going to stick up for a drug addict, right? And so they were able to send a person off to prison for life on one single hit of crack during the 1960s period of time. Well, then what happened was, you fast forward to the mid 90s, and in the mid 90s, our government started to realize that the public was starting to become much more accommodating to drugs, that they were going to have to decriminalize them at some point in time. And so they needed to find another driver to work mass incarceration. And they found that in 2002 in a case that came to the United States Supreme Court that said, is porn legal? Supreme Court said, oh, this is our opportunity right here. Yes, absolutely, it's legal. It's just an expression of speech. And as at that moment, we started flooding our families and our lives with all of these images of sexual deviance, knowing that this was going to addict the people. There was a different type of addiction. And now today, what we see is that the majority of people that are going to prison are going there on something related to sexual deviance, because our government created environments of sexual deviance, and as a result, they knew that you were going to eventually start producing sexual deviance as a result. And so now they have another driver that exists through a completely different type of addiction. And now the judges are saying, well, who's going to stick up for a sex offender, right? And so I'm not saying that this behavior is okay. What I'm saying is that that was an intentional act created by our Supreme Court. It has nothing to do with morality. It has nothing to do with right or wrong. It has to do with how can we continue to advance this industry. And what I have to say to those justices is that the best moral decision for a country? When you're supposed to be the honorable, the moral protagonist for a country, leading our country in a moral direction, is that really the best moral decision to make, right? Because you can create that sexual deviant environment, and then when people go into it, you can say, "Oh, look, but don't touch." And it doesn't work that way. These are people that are already, predisposed to those types of behavior, and now you're just going to cause it to happen. And now you have your driver for mass incarceration. The things and decisions that this court has made are not in the best interest of the country, and that court needs to own up to the despicable acts that they made for 243 years. Because the destruction of this country, what we're on the verge of right now, is 100% their fault. Those 9 justices, they have no right whatsoever to be called honorable. They have no right whatsoever for anyone to stand up in their presence, because as of today, they're nothing but a bunch of traitors that have been covering up the lies and treasonous and seditious acts of their institution for 243 years, so that they can rob the people of the United States and profit off their illegal acts. And the people of the United States need to know this truth. And I'm here to tell it.
Wow.
Wow.
It's just a tour de force to sit down with you and have a frank discussion about what's going on in the courts. It's very, very, very informative. I hope this goes far and wide. We have a good audience. I hope that everyone will like, share, and subscribe, because I want this message to get out. This is something that all of us who live in this country need to hear and need to understand, because we have this illegitimate system that has supplanted the legitimate and just system. The justice system has been taken over by a system of criminality. These are criminals performing criminal acts against the United States citizenry, and they get away with it under the color of law. It's this whole thing of your honor, when you have a person up there that's acting completely without honor in many, many cases. I mean, we've seen it in probate courts and family courts. You've got judges that allow the most heinous crimes and simply rubber stamp them and simply allow them to go on, because it's the thing that brings the most profit into that courtroom.
Lots of profit too.
And harming
people. Yeah, absolutely.
It harmed my mother and
yes,
many others.
That's
it
right.
harmed your mother. It harmed Hillary's dad. It's harming so many people.
Right. Thousands and thousands a day.
No wonder we didn't win in court.
That's
you
exactly
can never win. I felt everything that he described is exactly what happened to me. That was my experience. No matter what I did, I was targeted. While I was forced to watch my mother being isolated, neglected, and abused for exploitation.
Yeah.
This has got to stop. How can we help? How can we help you get the word out there? How can we help stop these crimes?
So, again, I did this because it was the right thing to do. 9 years ago, I just knew that when I saw what was happening to the people of the United States, I couldn't unsee that, and I couldn't go about my life just pretending like everything was normal. I knew at that point in time that I had no choice. I had sworn an oath to the Constitution of the United States myself. When I joined the military, I swore that I would support independent against all enemies, foreign and domestic. When I encountered someone warring against the Constitution domestically, I had no choice. I had a statutory obligation to stand up and do something about it. And yeah, it's cost me every single thing. It cost me my wife, my kids. I haven't seen or talked to my kids in 9 years, but it was what I had to do. But part of this was also me recognizing the fact that the things I was doing before, in my ignorance, working for the government, building solutions and systems that were harming the people of the United States, because I bought into this whole notion of national security. I also knew that the very systems that I had helped put into place as the chairman of the National Physical Security Council, the chairman of the National Transportation Security Council, building these systems that were against the people and benefited, that I needed to work to undo them. And I had an obligation to do that. I owe that at a minimum to the people of the United States. So,
So you're going back on tour again, right? Or did you already do all that?
So I've got one more tour left, and this is I've been back and forth across the country 18 times over the last 19 months. And as I've said, I don't get paid for this. I made a decision 9 years ago that I was going to do this, even if there wasn't money, because these people don't have money. These people are in prison. We haven't.
You're doing God's work.
We haven't. Well, he takes care of me. But all of these people in prison, I got to say, a lot of these people are not guilty. They're innocent. They didn't do anything wrong. And we even have the criminal procedure manual written by a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals judge. The fourth paragraph of the preface says that most prosecutors across America agree that as much as 15% of people in prison are innocent, but that is an acceptable deviance because our system isn't perfect. So we have a federal appellate judge that says, yeah, everybody agrees that up to 15% of people are innocent, but that's just luck of the draw because our laws aren't perfect. And the challenge, once again, that I have for them is, before you call something imperfect, let's first try using it the way that it was designed to be used. Don't blame the system if innocence is suffering because of your incompetence, right? Because the one thing that exists, the protection of the innocent from hasty or malicious charges from an overzealous prosecutor or a malicious judge, is the grand jury proceeding. When you remove that, don't be surprised if innocence is going to be in prison suffering. These people, a lot of them should not be in prison. A lot of them are innocent, and I don't think that we live in a nation where innocence was meant to be suffered. And yet, here it is. Benjamin Franklin, when he left the Constitutional Congress, he said that it's better that 1,000 guilty go free than for one innocent man be made to suffer. And yet we have a system that says, yeah, 15% of people are innocent, but that's okay. If that number's correct, that would mean that right now today, there's more than 600,000 people currently suffering innocent, despite the fact that the system didn't even follow the rules to put them into that institution. And that's not all right by me. And I don't think it's going to be all right by the people of the United States. So, all that I can do is continue to move forward and continue to get this information out, and hope and pray that one of these days God is going to release it, and the people are going to hear it, and the message is going to be received, and we will be able to do what's necessary to save this country from the destruction that's being brought on by the people that they believe are honorable. But
right.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Marcy.
Do you see progress? Are you getting positive progress doing this work? You must, or you wouldn't keep on doing it.
Well, I mean, I'll have my progress when I get to heaven, right? I mean, I've already committed to this, and unfortunately, there's only two ways out, and that's this army retreats or God calls me home. I mean, I can't stop it. When you rob a man of all he has, you made a man with nothing to lose.
Yeah. We hear you, because we've had the courts basically drain our states of 50 years from my parents. So I understand how you can't give it up. I mean, because it stays with you. Whenever you had something this happened to you so severe, and you went through the PTSD and the courts abusing you, you do want to take a stand. I know right now we do have a different administration in there. And I do believe that out with the old, in with the new. What do you think of that? I mean, do you think it's going to help? Do you think?
For a long time that Mr. Trump was going to get behind this. I did. And I actually he's received my paperwork 3 separate times. He received it first in May, right after he was convicted, before he was sentenced, because I was explaining to him that your conviction isn't valid because it derives from an indictment that they had to commit a crime to secure it.
Mm-hmm.
You're not permitted to be present in the grand jury to confront the hearsay evidence, hearsay accusations against you. That's a crime. It's obstruction of justice. And when the government commits that crime, when the prosecutor conspired by and between the accuser, Stormy Daniels, to deny Mr. Trump the right to be president, to confront those accusations against him, that crime was committed. And it derives from 1981 that says that all persons within the jurisdiction of the United States shall have fair and equal benefits of all laws and proceedings. So Mr. Trump has the right to the benefit of that proceeding that exists for his protection, and yet he was denied because the prosecutor did not permit him and decided to apply the laws unequally by permitting their client, the accuser, to be present to present the accusation, but deny the accuser the right to be present to confront it. That's an equal protection issue. It's absolutely no doubt about it. So yes, I thought that Mr. Trump was going to get behind this, and he was excited in the beginning. They were very thankful that I went and served on my own the state of New York on his behalf so that I can bring attention to this issue, but they didn't get behind it because they thought it was too big of a deal. And then again in in July, he was presented with this information again. And again, he didn't get behind it. And then in November, late November, for a third time, he was presented with the information. And unfortunately, the day that he got into office, he signed a number of executive orders. One of those executive orders was expanding the private prison contract with Geo Group and CoreCivic and CCNA. So he chose to expand the prison contract with these for-profit, privately traded prisons on the New York Stock Exchange instead of constricting them, which is needs to go. So if there's an intention to place the Constitution back in its foundation, I think he's going the wrong direction because he signed the order expanding the prison contract, and he signed an order opening the door and lifting the moratorium on federal executions. And those are two decisions that are in the absolute opposite direction from what we need to be going if we're going to resolve this issue. The prosecuting attorneys all work for him. They're part of the executive branch. If he wanted to fix this problem, he could direct his agents to obey the Constitution and stop obeying the unlawful, unconstitutional edict of the Supreme Court, and we would be able to move forward in a lawful, constitutional manner.
Yeah, it's a huge task, it's something, go ahead.
The other thing is that the people that he has in place, and I'm just simply saying this because I support him, especially on what he's doing with the budget and the corruption. I love that. But the problem is that our money isn't worth anything anyway. So we're focusing on the business attribute of government and not what's in the best societal interest of our government. What's in the best societal interest is how do we protect the people, not how do we get the money, because the money is worthless anyway, right? Because we're running government as though it's a business. And if you run government as though it's a business, then you're going to be concerned about what is in the best fiscal interest of the country as opposed to what's in the best societal interest. And you're going to make decisions and laws that are going to be focused on how do you generate revenue because it's a business. I think that government is not a business. I don't think that we should run it as though it's business because there's a lot of times that the decisions we're going to make are not what's in the best financial interest, but what's in the best interest of the people. And right now, we have 12 million children that have been robbed from their families by these CPS systems that have been put into institutions that's creating trauma that's in many cases never, ever, ever going to be able to be healed because of the illegal and unconstitutional acts of these states when they choose to. And they're doing that because for every child that they take from the love and care of their families, that child is going to grow up and have an 80% likelihood of going to prison over their lifetime. They are building a self-sustaining product through the abuse and trauma.
Stephen, have you been listening to this?
Really?
Yes, I have. It's been wow. There's a lot of context there. It's very, very fascinating. But I think I agree with you. There's a lot of denial of due process in the civil courts and then even in the criminal courts. So like I've seen that consistently with these cases, the CPS and guardianship court corruption cases that I've covered. That it's a consistent theme. It's their deprivation of a right to a jury trial.
So the states have no authority to take a child because the Supreme Court of the United States in 1984, in a case called Roberts versus United States, they identified that the right to intimate association is found to be fundamental, protected under the First Amendment. The fact that they identified it and incorporated it as a fundamental constitutional right means that the only way that you can remove that right would be through what's known as strict scrutiny, requiring the compelling state interest test, right? That's the highest judicial test that exists. And instead, we have the lowest judicial test being applied, the discretionary test, where the judges believe that they can use their discretion abusively to remove a fundamental constitutional right, and you can never use discretion with regard to a fundamental right. These judges are using the lowest level test to remove
Yeah, they absolutely are.
to remove. And as a result, when you look at the abuse of discretion, and abuse of discretion is actually the crime of perjury, it's the crime of oppression, it's the crime of extortion. But nonetheless, abuse of discretion, the Circuit Court Handbook identifies a two-part test. First part is, did the judge render a decision? Did he apply the incorrect judicial test? I told you that he just did. He used the lowest level test. He used his discretion when he was supposed to use the highest. The compelling state interest test was true, and he didn't do it. Therefore, an abuse of discretion occurred. Now, the second part of that test from the Circuit Court is any erroneous view of the law is an automatic abuse of discretion. And an erroneous view of the law is that in the judge's legal contemplation, that the inferior state law that permits him to be able to take a child from a family is in legal contemplation superior to the fundamental rights identified and codified in the Constitution of the United States, incorporated by the Supreme Court in Edict in 1984, Roberts versus United States. No state has the authority to remove any one of these children. Those children are fundamental to that family, and they got to get back home to them.
Well, the same thing would go with the elderly too. They're being taken out of their nursing homes, out of the homes. They're being forced into nursing homes. Is that applies to that?
Guardianships, separated from
Guardianships.
families.
It's the exact same thing. So the litigation I have is focused on bringing all children home, right? As I don't care if it's a 70-year-old child or if it's a 4-year-old child, these are children and they need to get back to their families, right? Because these are all people that have got trauma that's being inflicted upon them. They're all guardianships. Even the prisons are nothing more than guardianship. You're taking a person into custody, custodial relationship, because they can't take care of themselves. You place them into guardianship, and now you have adult guardianship through the state. And the state believes that they have a better ability to be able to take care of these people than they can take care of themselves. It's all guardianships, every bit of it. The state is stealing the children through guardianship. The state is stealing husbands and wives through guardianship, and the state is stealing the parents through the guardianship. That's all it is.
The elderly, the parents.
All it is. And they're
And
doing
targeting the next of kin in order is a tactic used so they can justify it.
right.
And then they end up isolating, neglecting, mandated supervision, and selling the properties and dying alone. And
Right.
that's a
Because-
crime. That's no different than what Hamas is doing.
But because the moment that you take custody of a person, be an adult or an elderly, the moment you take custody of them, you are responsible for their health, welfare needs, which means that they're under your custody, under your care. Their assets, their money, their property is now yours, right? So when we take these adult individuals and we put them in a custodial relationship where the attorney general has got responsibility for them, but that attorney general is then able to do whatever they want with their finances, with their QSIP, with their SESQB accounts, and this is all being done so that they can profit off of these illegal acts, right?
Exactly.
They're taking these people and they're profiting off of these institutions, and the thing is like when we have a child that's being not taken care of, right? We're not feeding them properly. We're not taking care of their health needs. Or we're not giving them their medical attention. We get into trouble when that happens, right? And there's such thing as child neglect, and there's such thing as elderly neglect, but there's also adult neglect. And if you state are going to take custody of these individuals because you believe that they can't take care of themselves, then you have a certain level of care that you must take, right? And that means that you need to make sure that these people have got the health, that they got their medicine, that they got enough food. You got to make sure that they're sleeping on a bed and that they've got air conditioning and all these things that you would expect because you're taking responsibility for that, right? But that's not what we see, right?
Exactly.
This is
Exactly.
You're
You're seeing the
No, we
opposite.
see a nice dog and pony show, but we don't see any actual action on as far as constitutional law goes. It's sad because I like you. I also grew up thinking we lived in with these in a certain country, had a certain image of America, and then only to come to find out it's just a lot more corrupt than we imagined. But I have very much the same sentiment.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, guys, like I said, when I when I started suffering and I started realizing all these people around me that were suffering, I can't let these people do this. There's no way. Injustice has this profound effect on us, and it causes us to take action, not just to defend ourselves, those that are below us, because we believe in something. We've seen it, and it causes us to do things that would be inconceivable in other contexts, but we do it because we believe in it, because it's real.
Well, isn't it kind of wrong? Isn't it kind of wrong for them to come in these courts and they say that, you're hurting your mom, you're exploiting her, so then they get guardianship of that person. Then all of a sudden they're doing it. They're getting their money. They're getting their property. They are not feeding them right. They're not giving them a bed. They're not letting them go outside in a nursing home. That's not right.
It's not. You're absolutely right.
No, it's a crime.
It's a crime.
So if I have a child, I have custody of them. I'm his guardian, right? I have a custodial relationship. So that child, I'm responsible for it. And because I love my child, I'm gonna do what's in the best interest. I'm gonna do everything I can to help this child be set up with a
right.
Right. I'm gonna make sure he's fed. And I'm gonna make sure he's got his medical attention. But if my child comes up to me and says, "Hey, Dad, I'm hungry," and I say, "Well, too bad. I've already fed you 2,000 calories. I'll feed you again tomorrow," I'm going to have that child taken from me. I'm going to find myself in jail because of the child neglect and child abuse that I'm inflicting. And you're absolutely right. What gives the state the ability to be able to say that they can take custody of this child and then deprive it of the basic fundamental rights and needs that it has? You're absolutely right. But we have
not only doing it to the children, they're doing it to the elderly. In
Right.
my case, my mother was transferred, which is human trafficking, from her beautiful apartment in the ocean, near me, her daughter, who took care of her. They put her inside a garage. Neglected care, falls, food in the refrigerator. It was disgusting. And guess what? She ended up dying alone. When she ended up in that hospital, she was full of bed sores.
Yeah.
She couldn't move, unkempt hair. It was the saddest thing. And she was treated. She didn't deserve that.
Yeah.
And it was cruel to make me have to watch it, and never did anything. They didn't do anything.
Yeah.
No matter how I went to court, I was targeted the whole time.
So
And God uses our pain. God is using this for us to do something about this.
Yeah.
Because if we didn't go through it, how are we going to be able to help others?
Right. It was never real to me, and it wouldn't have been if I would have lost everything. I'm
right.
I'm very thankful for what has happened to me. I mean, even my ex-wife, I thank her for the things that she's done, because without doing those things, I wouldn't be here doing the things I'm doing today. And I'm very proud of what I'm doing, because it is the right thing to do. But I want to make sure that what they did to my family, what they did to my kids, I want to make sure that my kids, even in my absence, I want to make sure that my son, that he knows what a man is. And I got to make sure that I set that example for him, so that at a point in time, he's going to be able to say, okay, this is what a man does. This is how a man acts. Because if I'm going to be proud of the man that he becomes, I must first be proud of the man that he emulates. Right? Same thing with my daughters. Like, my daughters are going to be looking to me as the example for what a husband's going to be. And I need to show them this is what a husband does. This is what we do. And so if I'm going to be happy with the men that they choose to give their hearts to, I must be the type of man that I would approve for them. So this is an opportunity for me to become the man that I want to be for my example, for my children. And it just so happens that God's blessed me with the ability to be able to help, my country in the process. But it's a huge task, but it's a task that we can all believe in, because all that I'm asking for, it's not complicated. All that I'm saying is what do we believe in? Do we believe in judges? Do we believe in man? Or do we believe in that Constitution? Right? Do we believe in its supremacy and its power? Because that's the one thing that will save our country, right? From the dissolution and fracturing and breakdown that we see right now today, the conflict and chaos that we have is the result of failure to follow the Constitution, that one law that we put into place. I believe that if we follow it, that we can bring our country back together, and that's something we can all agree on, right? It's something we all believe in. And so, this is nothing more than trying to point the country back to what they need to have faith in. That's our faith. That's what we believe in. And if we believe in it, then we know the path that we need to go. We know what the outcome's going to be. And, we're in the situation we're in today because at some point in time in the past, we made the wrong decision on the issue. And that set our country in the wrong trajectory. We're heading in the wrong direction. And now we're at a point where we're like, it doesn't even resemble America, right? All these things that we believe in, it doesn't exist, but it doesn't exist because we got on the wrong path because at some point in time, we made the wrong decision on the issue. And so when people say to me, yeah, but if we do this, if we let these people go, it's going to be terrible because they're all just a bunch of murderers and rapists and whatever else. And I'm going to say, I don't know what the outcome is going to be, but what I can say is that if we make the right decision on the issue, we're going to reach the right outcome. That I do know. So we can't look at the end.
We need to make America safe again.
Right.
America safe
Exactly.
again.
We can, as long as we have leaders that are going to set the example for the people, because I don't think that the people want this. But we got to make the right decision on the issue. So as they tell us to look at the end and oh, this can't work, we can't do that because of the outcome, I'm going to say, no, we're in the wrong position today because we made the wrong decision on the issue. We're going to look at the issue and we're going to say, are we going to obey the law this time or not? And if we are, then we know what the outcome is going to be. But I know that no matter what, right will produce the right outcome. We're in the wrong today because we made the wrong decision. Let's make the right decision this time. Let's obey the Constitution and let's see where that takes our country, because it's going to take our country in a different direction than we're in today.
There's something that has been just on my mind ever since I heard it, and that was when Marcy said, well, you must see some progress or you would stop. But I just want to say, when Luann and I first realized the serious problems that we were seeing in these courts and we began to confront them, it was like beating our heads against a brick wall. We went to see all of the police. We went to see the social service agencies. We went to see the legislators. We went to see the attorney generals. We went to see everybody in power, and we're getting nowhere. It was just like beating our head against a brick wall. And I was crying out to my mother one day. I said, Mom, we're just feels like we're wasting our energy, wasting our time, accomplishing nothing. And she said, Rob, remember, our family has been involved in the civil rights movement since long before I was born. We were the ones that were the white family with the crosses burned in our lawn because we were supporting the civil rights movement. We were supporting the end of slavery. We were supporting the all of those things that were unpopular and not liked by all the neighborhoods in which we found ourselves. But she said, but we were doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And so we couldn't turn back from that. So we kept at it, and it gradually, over a long period of time, grew into something that has really made a lot of difference in our society. Surely we're not 100% balanced at this point. That's not the case, but the progress is definitely there. So the fact that we're here now doing the right thing, that you are on this mission that is the right mission, that we are on this mission that is the right mission, to bring the right information to enough people to build that momentum to the point where we really do make the difference. It may be that all of us are gone before we see the fruits of our labor. But the labor itself is a labor of love and a work of God. And I don't believe there's any way to stop or turn back, because it's what is right. It is what is just. It is what is true. And we must do this for the sake of those that come after, whether it means we sacrifice everything and see nothing for it or not. And that's how I feel about it.
You're right. And, for my son, I mean, what kind of father would I be if I left this for him? I may not win, but damn it, I'm gonna take down as much of it as possible so that he doesn't have to deal with it, right?
Exactly.
But I can't unsee something, and this is my faith. I'm going to live out my faith, and I may fail, but I would rather fail daring, trying to do what's right, than to accept status quo and mediocrity, because that's not me. And I don't think that any one of us can do that. If we don't do this, we don't fight for that Constitution, then we've already lost our country. It's already done. We can't give up.
You just reminded me of something that my father said when I was a little girl, that we were leaving Cuba, that he came to the United States. Castro dismantled families, no different than my experience, our experience with the probate courts. It's almost like communism. But he said something that if I don't do this for you guys, if I don't leave my family, then what kind of father would I be? Because I wouldn't be taking care of you and your mother.
Exactly.
And my brother was alive at the time, and they both were able